What's up, YouTube? It's Crowday23 here, and Standard's pretty sweet, turns out. And I wanted to go over a deck that I thought was really cool to play in the format, and a deck that I've had fun playing on Arena, and kind of want to share with people. It is a Temur ramp deck. As you know, that we had like 4-color ramp decks when Omnath was legal, and it turns out that some of these ramp decks are actually still pretty good and can do really powerful things at really early turns of the game. So, what exactly are we looking at? Basically, the idea of a ramp strategy, of course, like any other ramp strategy, you try to put a ton of lands into play and then just cast haymakers after haymaker after haymaker. Uh, Essentially, we're looking for cards like Beanstalk Giant, who kind of serve as both as a ramp spell plus a threat for later in the game. That does get bigger the more lands that we play. Ugin the Spirit Dragon can take care of decks that try to go wide and lets us go big as well. Essentially, a win condition on its own, and then its ultimate just putting more permanents into play, which could lead to more Beanstalk Giants playing more lands to make Beanstalk Giants bigger. Shark Typhoon, which is kind of another card that does play double duty in the same way that Beanstalk Giant does, just in a different way. Obviously, in our ramp deck, we can either just play Shark Typhoon and then all of all of our like counter spells, uh, Shatter Skull smashing, making however big of a shark that we want to make with the available mana. Genesis Ultimatum making 7/7s on top of putting permanents into play and drawing us cards as well. Shark Typhoon just becomes a really amazing card, and especially when we cycle it, it does make a shark on its own, which sometimes just making a 4/4 or a 5/5 shark at the end of someone's turn can just be good enough to win the game while backing up with some disruption. So those are like the main ways that we are winning the game. Uh, Shark Typhoon, Ugin, Beanstalk Giant, Genesis Ultimatum to kind of bring them together, plus ramp into our lands. So, what exactly do the rest of the cards do? Fire Prophecy is a card that can essentially turn extra lands that are in our hand that we don't necessarily need into just other cards. You know, whether we ditch a land to like draw another land, we're essentially getting past more lands in our deck to eventually just draw gas. And dealing 3 damage is very important when Rogues is coming. Rogues is a deck that people are playing, and other small like little creatures that Fire Prophecy can just pick off and then obviously loot away some of your other cards while getting to keep them in your deck. Glimpse of Freedom is a 1 of in the deck, can essentially be escaped at instant speed to draw a card, and for 2 mana to draw a card, that's not really too bad, especially when you are able to leave up Fire Prophecy into the Royal. If you can kick it, you get to draw a card, essentially playing what a Disperse like effect. Obviously, stapling draw a card to it in our ramp deck. 4 mana is not going to be a problem. Drawer Disruption is essentially a censor that doubles as a land. Shatter Skull Smashing is a land that can come into play untapped if we pay 3 life. Also acts as removal for planeswalkers and other creatures. Cultivate, a ramp spell that gets 2 lands out of the deck, putting 1 on the battlefield, 1 into our hand. Mystical Dispute is a 1 of, really good against rogue strategies and against like other blue based decks just as a way to tempo them out. Uh, Essentially, getting to play like a Beanstalk Giant on turn 3 and getting to leave up Mystical Dispute for a blue spell is really nice. Migration's Path, essentially a better version of Explosive Vegetation, where you can get 2 basic lands out of the deck, and at the worst case, if you've gotten most of your basic lands out of your deck, you can just cycle it away and draw some cards. As far as the lands, we have the red-green flip land Crag Crown Pathway, Fable Passage to get the 11 basic lands out of the deck, Katria Triome, way to fix mana, cycles to obviously draw cards, and Riverglide Pathway, the other dual land that is 1 color on one side, 1 color on the other. Not sure exactly what they call these, but really sweet lands. 23 lands usually is pretty light for a ramp deck, but with all the drawing of cards, the way to just ramp and pull lands out of the deck and put them into play, that just makes all of these spells way more live. Plus the fact that Jawar Disruption and Shatterskull Smashing are also lands as well. So we really have 29 lands in the deck. It just happens to be that 6 of them are spells, and 4 of them can cycle, which is really sweet. The sideboard, some pretty standard stuff. Scorching Dragonfire for the Croxas. You can, even though technically 3 damage is not going to kill a Croxa, since it gets sacrificed to its own trigger, Scorching Dragonfire can then exile it. Also, some of the other like red-black sacrificey type cards that this just deals with, and then you don't have to really worry about them again. Especially with Lurrus running around, you can just exile that creature, and then Lurrus doesn't get a chance to get it back. Bone Crusher Giant is another card that can kill the smaller creatures and then also just put a big 4/3 into play. That's really hard for some decks to deal with. Now, while it does die to opposing like Scorching Dragonfires and Fire Prophecies, still really good. Hit your opponent on the way out too if they manage to deal with it, and of course that's if you aren't playing any disruption in the main deck after you play these. Can really just punish some decks for trying to get rid of it and then spending multiple resources on trying to get rid of it but failing to do so. Klothys, God of Destiny, is a really sweet card in the sideboard that can obviously give you some utility. It can ramp you if you exile a land card. Other than that, it can gain you 2 life and deal 2 damage. And being a 4/5 indestructible that you can probably realistically turn on like after sideboard, probably a lot easier. Just makes it a consistent ramp option on top of just adding a clock to your opponent. Another Mystical Dispute, because Mystical Dispute is a really, really, really good counterspell. You don't want to really overload on it with how the format looks right now, but there's definitely worlds where I think playing 3, maybe even 4 Mystical Disputes in the 75 would not be a crazy idea. The Acrone War, a card that you really don't see, lets you gain control of a creature as long as it remains on the battlefield, and then until your next turn, your creatures your opponents control attack each combat if able, and then each creature deals damage equal to its power if it's tapped, which basically allows you to make your rogue's opponent have to attack and then essentially just wiping their board, on top of just kind of getting to control what exactly they get to attack with the plethora of removal spells and counter spells that we're playing. Arcs of Agonis as well basically lets us leverage all these spells that we've been casting, all of our Jawari disruptions into the Royals, things of that nature, and turn them into extra cards with Ox of Agonis to essentially just draw 3 cards. Gives us a clock because getting a 5/3 as well for 2 mana and exiling cards that really don't matter since Uro is banned. This card really isn't fighting for cards in the graveyard against Uro. It just gets to do its thing. And that is Temur Ramp for Standard. Again, really sweet deck. I like playing it. It's sweet. There's definitely some different tools and different things you can ramp into, depending on how janky or how fixed of a meta that you're trying to focus on. If you're trying to take care of certain decks, then there's some cards that you could probably move from the sideboard into the main board, take out some of the other main deck cards, and just kind of shuffle things around in the board from there if you are trying to beat certain decks. But I think with how this deck is configured, it has a pretty decent matchup against the majority of the decks that you would face in the current standard meta. But let me know what you guys think in the comments of this video. If there's a deck that you want me to cover more in depth or anything like that, please be sure to leave it in the comment section of this video. Also, please consider leaving a like and subscribing as well if you enjoy these videos and you just enjoy my channel in general. I really appreciate helping us grow, and hopefully we can reach over 50 subs by the end of the year. Lofty goal, I know, but who knows, we'll make it happen. But thanks to everyone watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I hope to see you all in the next video.